This is gonna hurt. It's time for the Suffering Podcast.
We live our whole life thinking that we know the definition of what is going on around us. We believe we know joy, we believe we know pain, and we believe we know love. There is always the certainty that we have life figured out, often before we graduate high school. Reality smacks us in the face when those certainties are smashed, and a new experience disintegrates our prior perceptions. We experience life in a new way that defines our belief in the concrete. Often, this doesn't happen just once, but multiple times throughout our time on this planet. They will say that time builds wisdom. The truth is that experience will give us a far better education than anything we can learn in the classroom. We must remain open to having our perceptions eclipsed, to truly know we do not have it all figured out. I'm Kevin Donaldson, always here with Mike Falaise. Tom Flynn will be sitting in with me tonight, and welcome to the Suffering Podcast. If you're a fan of overcoming adversity and overcoming suffering, then we're for you, because that's the stories that we highlight, and that's what we do here. So do me a favor, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, please comment, ring the bell so you can get notified of all of our new content. Now you can join. And of course, follow us on all social media so you can find out what we're up to. On this episode of the Suffering Podcast, we welcome Dave Fisher and Jeff Golden to discuss the suffering of parental alienation. Because, gentlemen, only when you love something more than yourself and you get it taken away can you truly appreciate what it's done to your life. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Before we get into anything, let's throw a big shout out to our marquee sponsor. That's Toyota of Hackensack. We don't trust anybody as police. We certainly don't trust anybody as podcasters, but we do trust the boys at Toyota Hackensack. So go to toyotahackensack.com and let them find you a car. So, gentlemen, each week we take a question from our audience. This question comes from Ruminate69. Throughout this past year, what has improved in your life? Just this past year. So let's start it off on this side of the table before we get to the long-winded answers on this side of the table. So, Jeff, why don't we start off with you?
Well, let's see. In the last couple of years, I had some health issues. Health has been really good in the last year. Had a car wreck last year. Nice new car this year.
That's definitely That's definitely an improvement. New car. Hey,
Might be the way to do it.
Can't go wrong with that.
I lost my job. So, right in January at the start of this year. And this year I've been living the life of leisure, just trying to get reconnected and recharged and get ready to find a job out there. But, I'm doing some studying. I'm focusing on face stuff, and I'm getting, a lot of time with my kids at home. I'm dropping the kids off at the bus and picking them up, and it's really allowed me a lot of freedom to not have to worry about the stress of a job right this year. So in a sense, that's a good thing, and that's a positive thing.
Kind of gives you a chance to step back, refocus, re-energize, and then when you're ready to re-engage, you absolutely can go out and do it.
Yep.
Yeah, the things that are important.
Tom, what do you think?
So it's going to sound self-serving,
As they usually are.
to the podcast. Past year, I just got past my rookie year being associated with the podcast, and seeing all of our guests being involved, behind the scenes and occasionally here on the mic, it gives perspective, and it's helped me self-confidence and survival, because I'm going through my own story as well. So.
Well, I try to knock down your self-confidence every once in a while.
Frequently.
But the funny thing is so on Sunday, we just met the gentleman. I don't know if Tom ever told you how we met. We just passed each other in New York City in front of Madison Square Garden. Thousands of people there. Calls out my name. Of course, I'm not real happy about people calling out my name. But the podcast that I was coming from recording on 51st, he just met the guy whose show I was recording that particular day. And it's kind of like a funny little fortuitous full circle moment, which was pretty cool. But I'm happy that Tom's here. I think he's a vital. He is a valuable member to the team before, but now he's a vital member to the team. So I'm very, very happy.
I appreciate that. Likewise.
So this past year, if you look at it as a whole, there's some awfulness that has happened to this podcast. We lost my partner. And if I were to sit there and dwell on that negativity, I wouldn't really have much of an answer for this, but it's all about perspective. You know, sometimes those things that you think are negatives and sometimes those things that you think that are just awful, they really broaden your scope and make you step back, like you're with your job. You step back for a moment and you're ready. It just gives you a moment to think, a little bit moment of clarity. I myself have gained an incredible amount of knowledge over this past year because of those bad things that happened to me. My field of vision has opened up tenfold. And I'm not going to say my partner's suicide was a good thing, but what it did for me and what it did for my eyes and my peripheral vision has been something that I'm very grateful for. And with that new peripheral vision, I've been able to reach out with a little bit more strength and a little bit more experience. I have that life experience that I can see others maybe going down a certain path, and it's allowed me to be more proactive in my approach when I meet them or when I speak to them. I'll be that proverbial pain in the ass until you tell me you hate me, but at least you'll be alive to tell me you hate me. I'm okay with that. So if you look at it as a whole, this year it could be not that great, but as a matter of fact, it's because of all this, it's really opened my eyes, and that's a great thing. So Ruminate69, thank you for sending that question in. Keep sending in your questions, and we will try to get them on the air. So, gentlemen, all right, we got to get to know each other. We've never spoken to each other face to face, and yes, pun intended. Tom introduced me to you. Well, Tom, the whole reason that I know Tom is through the FACE organization, which is an acronym for
Fathers and Children's Equality.
Fathers and Children Equality.
But I got to say something, though.
Sure.
The name of the group is Fathers and Children's Equality. We're not limited to fathers. There are second wives, non-custodial mothers, grandmothers. All of the other female people are also in the organization.
Every once in a while, you got to have a group that's exclusive. Everybody wants exclusivity until you're on the outside of that exclusivity. Then you want everything to be inclusive. So, the fact that you're helping other people, it's the problem, parental alienation. It's not who it is, what gender they are. It's a common problem amongst all people. But before we get into FACE, I really want to find out a little bit more about you gentlemen. So, Dave, let's figure out how you grew up, where you grew up, what your life was like.
I grew up in Ohio in a small town called Granville. It's the community that Denison University is in. So like a New England community that got transplanted in the middle of the Midwest. And, that's where I grew up. And I went to school in Virginia and moved to Jersey in 1991, 92. And I've been, here for 20, 30 years, with exception of like 5 years in Atlanta. And so I've been, adopted this area. It's like something, it takes a few years to get used to Jersey, but once you're here and you get acclimated, you never want to leave. So it's a great place. So I'm happy to be here. And I got married in 2007, and I had a 3-year marriage with my first wife. I was divorced. I essentially came to FACE on the recommendation of a lawyer that works with FACE pretty heavily, who's no longer with us, Dave Davis, and he recommended I come to the FACE meetings and I see what it's all about. And I did that 6 months before I filed for divorce, and I was going to the meetings. And
so, Dave, before you get into any of that stuff, because that's really the meat and potatoes of why we're here, because I can see us traveling down that road. I don't want to give it away too quick. You don't show what's behind the curtain until it's time to show what's behind the curtain. So, Jeff, where'd you grow up?
Newark, New Jersey.
Oh, wow. Newark boy, huh? Essex County?
Yep.
Yeah.
Father was a lawyer. In fact, I come from a family of lawyers, probably about 5 lawyers in the family between both sides. My father insisted that I be a lawyer, and I decided very early that's not what I want to do. Didn't like what he was doing, and that wasn't for me. I liked doing things that are more that you have to use your hands doing, and he, in contrast, didn't know which end was the business end of a screwdriver, and So I went ahead and did my things, and that was a big conflict between us for a long, long time.
That conflict between you and your father strictly because you didn't want to be a lawyer?
There might have been other things also, but that was a huge part of it, yes.
And growing up, playing sports, regular
Absolutely
childhood?
a non-sports fan, and that also had something to do with my father. Okay.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he didn't encourage anyone to play any kind of game with a ball because hey, you might get hit, you might get a head injury. Okay, that's the kind of lawyer he was.
Yeah. Well, he was an injury lawyer.
Yeah.
Oh, it was perfect. You're tailor-made to play sports. If you get hit, you get a little money on the side. Not bad. Not bad. Tom, tell us how. No, I don't want to hear.
Yeah, it's a couple of head injuries.
So going throughout, and we're going to skip forward a little bit. When you were young men, before you both, I'm assuming you're married and divorced as well?
Twice.
Twice. Okay. Again, once is enough. Twice is enemy action.
No, first divorce was wonderful. First divorce cost me $11.
Oh, is that the filing fee?
No, it wasn't even that. I didn't participate in it. They couldn't find me to serve me. She was paying $10 a week to a lawyer until there was enough to cover the cost of filing a divorce. And I didn't do anything. They couldn't find me. They couldn't order me to do anything. So we were divorced. But it took.
Where were you that they couldn't find you?
Not far, but I intentionally decided to not be findable.
You were on the lam.
See, that's something else with my father. My father said, well, she wants to get divorced, and you don't know, you could wind up paying a lifetime alimony, so why don't you just disappear?
Really?
So I did.
I don't. What year is this? What year are we talking?
That was in the early 1970s.
Okay. Yeah, little different these days.
And wound up, well, if they can't serve you, it still could be the same. But it wound up taking 40 months to get divorced.
That's about average now. So both of you gentlemen, before you got married the first time, what did you have this idea of marriage as? What was it to you? Was it just something that you were supposed to do growing up?
I think that's a good representation of it. I think everybody feels like that's the thing you do. When you go establish yourself in a career and then you find somebody and eventually
progression of life.
It's just what everybody's told that this is what you're supposed to do.
Yeah, and when you get into the reality of it, when toothbrushes are in the same sink, is when reality hits. So for both of you, they're looking, hindsight's always 20/20. You look back over your first marriage, and you notice some things. You saw some things, but you chose to ignore them. Was that the way that it was? Like, when did it become incompatible between everybody?
For me, it was almost immediate. It was pretty startling. Once I was married, my first wife, my parents were visiting and they were at the wedding and they stayed with us for a couple of weeks. And within a couple of weeks, she was having my mother crying, essentially. I just was totally stunned by
Over
it.
what?
I don't know. It was like they were interacting. I was at work. I wasn't in the house, and my wife was there with my parents, and things just weren't gelling there. And so I knew right then and there that there was something amiss. And it wasn't until several years later when I could see the writing on the wall, come into face meetings, that I knew this was not gonna last. So
Were there children of the first marriage?
just one as
was
a
a child.
result. Yeah.
Okay. There was a child in the first marriage. Jeff, with your first marriage, when did you start to see the cracks?
We were actually living together for about 4 years is all it was. But I could see that there were some incompatibilities I didn't really see. You got to remember, I'm from Newark, New Jersey, nice, close-knit neighborhood. Everybody knows everybody. This is a girl that I went to high school with. We even dated in high school, but then we went our separate ways. She married somebody else, and then we ran into each other on a bus one day. And
Must be fate, right?
well, no, there was more
Either
to
good
it
or
than
bad.
that. I had a cousin whose someone in his wife's family died, and he told me that he was talking to the widow, and that she knows me. I'm thinking to myself, hey, I'm 22 years old. I don't know any widows. How could this be? Well, it turned out she married someone, and he died very young, and so we sort of got together then. But there was just a lot of strange things happening, and she's a nice lady, so I really don't want to say too much about it because I'm sure that someone else who knows us, because like I said, close-knit neighborhood, We didn't talk to each other for 27 years after the divorce. Ran into each other at a high school reunion, and now at high school reunions, we always sit next to each other.
So you became friends.
Yeah, we're fine now.
Worked out your differences.
Yeah.
There's hope, I guess.
Tom, I'm going to pose this question to you.
Yeah.
Now, I know the first Flynn marriage, the ceremony lasted longer.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Okay.
The marriage lasted about as long as a cocktail hour.
Okay, so I believe that was the term.
Yeah.
When did you start seeing the cracks in your first marriage?
So I think it had to do with me being on the job. My first wife, we dated for a very long period of time, and we were always the life of the party. My ex's first name is Linda, and we affectionately became known of the group as Flinda. We were like the party couple. We were the life of the party, just great to be around. But then law enforcement entered the picture. And
You got married before you were a cop.
Yeah.
That's a big mistake, by the way.
Yes. I wish you were, wish we had met sooner.
Well, yeah,
But the rigors of law enforcement, and telling her, like, listen, I'm junior guy. I got to work on Christmas. Well, we were supposed to go to my cousin's cabin in Pennsylvania. Can't just get somebody else to work. And I was like, it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
And just from then and there, and similar to Jeff's story, my first marriage cost me $300. We kind of parted ways, kind of spit in the palm, shook hands, gave a hug, and we went our separate ways.
But what was the crack? Other than law enforcement, like what was the other than Christmas and stuff? Was there something where you just like, this is not happening? This is it.
Yeah, it started escalating into arguments, and being in law enforcement, as you know, a simple argument, and Jeff, Dave, you know the stories that domestic violence doesn't have to involve actual violence. And when I saw these arguments kind of escalating, I'm figuring this is putting my lifelong dream as being a cop in jeopardy, and it's better that we part ways. And I didn't see children in the picture, no assets, and we just parted ways. It was
So you're fortunate that you got out scot-free, but
the first one.
yeah. But with every bad beat in life, there's always lessons. Did anybody take any lessons from their first marriage?
Yeah, I think for me, I think it's really eye-opening when you go through that whole experience. It's really like you spend years unwinding what you spent, years with this person, and it really, makes you open your eyes to, what's going on out there, and you're like much more selective when you're dating again and finding your second wife, and my second wife is my final wife. I can say that with confidence.
Don't tell me you're taking till death do us part a little serious on it, a little bit more serious.
I'm taking it literally. Yeah. But in 20, 30, 40 years from now, but obviously, yeah. So I know I intend this one to last a long time. So she's you got to pick well. You've got to choose who you want to spend the rest of your life with, and you've got to really, scrutinize people, and you just can't walk in like you might have when you were like really young. It's
Well,
like
I think the biggest lesson from first wives is you realize that marriage is a job. It's work. It's a lot of work. And if you're willing to think about if you went to your job, whatever your chosen vocation is, and you had a difficult day. We've all had difficult days at work. And you just threw your hands up and say, I quit. No, you power through it. You work through it because it's worth it. At the end, it's not going to be, now is not going to be forever. So I see a lot of, like how old was everybody in the first marriage? So
22.
You were 22.
39.
39. Okay, so you had a little bit more.
26.
26. With age comes wisdom, and sometimes you're so jaded by the lessons that you learn, you might not see something else. You might be overlooking something else. Well, like at least this one's not as bad as my first wife. That type of thing. So you got married twice.
Yeah.
So how long in between marriages?
About 10 years.
10 years. So what changed in those 10 years? Because I know most people who get divorced, they'll say, I'm never getting married again. I'm never getting married again. Anybody who's going to get married is stupid.
But remember, first marriage, no children.
Mm-hmm.
It was just a complete break, okay? So all those things that people get lessons from, I didn't get those lessons because we just split and never saw each other again until 27 years later.
And I'm assuming your first divorce did not go so well.
It did not go well at all. It took 22 months. There was lots of false allegations and the whole gamut of nonsense that you can imagine in family court. If you've been through it, you know what I'm talking about.
But the false allegations. Do you mind sharing with us some of the false allegations?
Well, I mean, there were four or so DIFUS calls that were fabricated. One was, there was no food or heat in the house. The other one, my dog was having sex with my daughter.
Wow.
Yeah, some crazy stuff.
Wow.
And,
that's one I never heard. The key component to any law enforcement officer being the best version of themselves is through education. Sherry Alsop is a leader in providing that education to police agencies, preparing them for the all too frequent dealings with sexual assault victims.
You've seen Sherry on episode 169 of the Suffering Podcast. She survived incest and almost daily sexual assault, so she comes from a place of experience and true understanding.
Sherry has the intelligence, commitment, and compassion to open the eyes of those on the front lines, while providing the tools to effectively deal with a difficult situation. Sherry's instruction comes from experience and multiple certifications.
Training with Sherry will offer on-site training, customized schedules, specialized instruction tailored from a victim's perspective.
You are going to hear Sherry's heart-wrenching but inspiring survivor story. Learn proprietary trauma-informed training techniques, uncovered victim-centered interview methods while earning continuing education credits according to your state guidelines. To be the best, you must learn from the best. Let Sherry also guide you through the delicate cases of sexual assault from a victim's point of view.
Be a source of comfort to those victims affected by these traumatic experiences while producing a solid investigation and uncovering details that often go unnoticed.
To find out more or to contact Sherry Alsop, go to sherryalsop.com. That's SherryAllsup.com.
The DIFUS people are calling and trying to keep a straight face, because it's really difficult for them to, take this stuff seriously as well, because the allegations are outlandish. And, fortunately, in my case, the family court judge that was involved, basically lost any credibility, on my ex's side and said, none of these things seem credible here, and they were all unfounded allegations ultimately after months-long investigations, and you get the letter and
But it's the words, right? It's the words that's hurt. So if I call somebody in my life a pedophile and they're 100% exonerated, you're going to think twice about leaving your kids with that person.
Yeah, it does have long-lasting consequences, but most people think, hey, these judges can't be wrong, these allegations, there must be something going on there. But in reality, in family court, you don't have that. It's like people say what they need to say to get what they want. It's really who tells the better story. And
anybody can say anything. Family court is theater in reverse. when you go to the theater, you're sitting at the low seats in the audience. There's a stage in the front. The players are on the stage, and if they do a good job, you'll laugh, you'll cry, you'll applaud, whatever. Family court is exactly the opposite. You are the players. You're sitting at the low counsel tables in the middle of the room. The judge on the stage in the front, the high desk, he's the audience. And if you can get him to laugh, cry, applaud, whatever, then you win.
It's a hard battle to fight when somebody starts making allegations. However, I've asked Tom this question with his current situation. I'll ask it this way. I'm like, well, what's their deal? Everybody's perspective from their point of view is right and just and truth. And I always like to hear, because if you know the other person's battle plan, why they're saying these things, why they're saying these outlandish things, you can get a better understanding of how to fight the war.
Right. And a lot of the times in litigation in family court, one of the adversaries will be very open about that. They'll tell you, if you do this, I'm going to do that. And, you'll see, I'm going to file this and, you're going to pay. And, they'll make those kind of threats. And I'm in face meetings and I say, this is the kind of spouse you want. This person is telling you exactly what they're going to do to you next. So you know exactly what to do.
Dave, with your wife specifically, why was she making these allegations? Was it simply to get custody?
She was being coached. She was working with the battered women's shelter, and she was getting advice from the ladies over there on what to do. And she was enrolling my daughter into therapy sessions, art therapy, to where they're talking about child abuse and all that stuff. Draw what you see here and there. So all this stuff that was being done was meant to sort of like coach the kids into getting involved in the litigation by basically corroborating stories of abuse that never happened.
So as a police officer, when I had heard those stories of abuse, it doesn't matter whether you believe them or not. You got to take them seriously,
Right?
Because it's the one time you don't take it seriously where it's true. So the police officers, I'm assuming, have showed up at your place,
Yeah.
especially with those type of allegations.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that you have to really be aware of. And as police officers and law enforcement, you have to understand that a lot of times this stuff is just false allegations meant to get an advantage in family court. And unfortunately, you get a lot of people rolling into our face group, just because they have nowhere else to turn. They've been, just run through the court system, and they're like, carrying their head under their shoulder here, trying to get some help. And we're not helping the people that are legitimately abusing their children or doing anything domestic violence, legitimate cases where there's true violence there. Those people aren't showing up. They aren't the ones coming. They're ashamed. They're staying home. They're staying out of the limelight. They're not coming to face meetings. It's the people that that are being falsely accused of this stuff that are showing up and saying, "Hey, my wife just said this about me. What do I do? I don't know what to do here."
Well, with your case specifically, were you arrested?
No.
Were you separated from the house?
No, my ex left the house, so I retained the marital home because she left and went to the battered women's shelters, and they basically, when I had Jeff serve her my divorce papers when I filed, within, I went to the office that day after he served her in the morning, and by the afternoon she had called up the shelters and said, "Hey, my husband just filed for divorce. What do I do?" And they said, "Come on down, we'll help you." And so she basically packed up the car and put my daughter in the back and went off to the shelter.
So what kind of rights would a woman have to their child? Because it's your child as well. It's, if you have dual, I hate to call children property, but it's kind of the same thing. You have dual property, they just can't take it. It's theft.
Wait, Kevin, you've heard that possession is 9/10 of the law.
Yes.
Okay? And yes, it's dual property, which means you have equal rights. And either one of you has as much right to pick up that child and walk away with it as the other one does until the first time you're in court. Because the first time you're in court, one of you is going to walk out of the courtroom with less parental rights than you walked in with.
It's a shame, too, because the kids don't ask to be born. And then all of a sudden you got two grown children fighting over another child. With yours, Jeff, in particular, your second marriage is where it went awry.
Yes.
Okay, so you waited 10 years. You get married again.
Yes.
Obviously, you have a child.
Yes.
So why don't you walk us through that process?
Let me start before the beginning of that process. My sister went to a meeting at a Jewish community center, and the speaker was talking about before people get married, they should first live together for at least a year, especially if they're of different faiths, because you want to just live a whole year together to see, well, what is there in this other person's background or there's other things that they do in their culture that's just going to be impossible for you to deal with. And my sister did that because my nephew was dating a Catholic girl, and they thought that was a great thing to do. Well, they wound up not living together. Okay, they did get married, and they had a wonderful marriage. They're married almost 30 years.
Try selling that to a Catholic father.
My nephew's youngest son, or probably his oldest son, is going to be getting married in about a month or so, and so everything worked out wonderful with them. So she's telling me this, and it didn't click with me. But in retrospect, yes, that would have been a wonderful idea. In fact, I told my wife, my soon-to-be wife that would be a wonderful thing for us to do. And she said, "Oh, I couldn't do that." Well, why not? Well, my mother would never allow that. So, well, let me go talk to your parents.
A bold move.
So I did. We go over there one day. It's a nice summer day. Everyone's out on the front porch, and I broached this subject about people should live together for a year. And her mother said, "I would never approve of that." So, and her daughter is going along with that. So I guess we're not going to live together. So, okay, let's get married. So we're getting married without having that experience of having lived together for a year first. And yeah, there are cultural differences, and there are things that that became issues.
Because there's hard stops. There's hard stops in every relationship. There's things that you cannot get through. If, like, my wife leaves the light on, she drives me absolutely up the wall by leaving the light on. It's a light, okay? It's not something for me to break up the marriage. However, there are certain things that if she were to do that are hard stops for me. You know what? I can't think what listen, I've been married for 17 years, and we've been together for 22 years. So if I haven't found those hard stops yet, chances are I'm not going to find them. But that's what living together does. And that old world style of living, I disagree with it. And God bless anybody who does agree with it. Now, your background specifically, what form of Judaism are you? Are you Orthodox, ultra-Orthodox, Reformed?
I'm none of those.
You're none of those.
I'm none of those.
You just grew up in a Jewish household.
Non-observant Jewish household.
Okay. Because what I found, like Reform Jews, they seem to be they know the world is changing. Where you have the Orthodox or, the ultra-Orthodox or Hasidic or something like that, they are this is the way that it is, this is the way it's been for generations, and it's the way it'll be for generations past. So that's the only reason I asked that question, because it might play into your thinking. Just the fact that you're willing to live with this woman tells me that you weren't Orthodox or ultra-Orthodox or Hasidic. So that's a place to go. So you end up getting married. Mm-hmm. And how long? Well, you had a child. How
Yes.
many children?
We had 2 children.
You had 2 children.
Before the marriage ended.
Okay. And how long did the marriage last?
I know when the divorce was final, and I know when we got married. I guess from one to the other, that was maybe a total of 7 years.
Okay. And what was the hard stop for you where he said, "This is it. This is not happening. We cannot live together anymore"?
There were a lot of them, okay, but the one that the one that broke the camel's back, okay, was I was in the system sale business, and things were rough in my business, and I'd lost my job, and I was unemployed for about a year, and I was thinking, well, why can't I find another job? I mean, maybe because I'm over 40. I don't know why. Okay, but at that time, I thought, well, there's all these other people who I've seen who have a lot harder start than I did, and they're able to pull it together. Like I was thinking in particular of my office was in Philadelphia, and there was a Korean family that started out with a produce stand on the sidewalk in Philadelphia. Then they advanced, they bought a little store, and now it's a produce store in a store. And then they advanced, and it turned into a supermarket. And so this whole family pulled together, and they were able to overcome things. I always wanted to have my own business, and I thought, and we had a business that I had always been talking about. I said, well, let's do that. And I think it was while I was still working. I said, and what we'll do is I'll keep working, and you can be in the store at the beginning, and I'll come in and do what has to be done at night, and we'll get the business going that way. And she said, I'm not going to do that. Well, what's the matter? Well, what about the baby? The store will have a back room. Put her playpen in the back room instead of the living room. I'm not putting my baby in the back of a store. Okay? And that was just one of the things that I hadn't found out about until long after. There were tons of other things that, when you're going through that first year, you find out things about the other family. Figure, why are they doing this weird thing? Why does my mother-in-law have a sister that she doesn't talk to? Okay, weird things like that. And so in that family, that's a tradition that they have of just shunning people,
excommunicating.
Yeah, and talking about parental alienation. Okay, that's what they do. That's how I became the parental alienation targeted parent, because they're shunning me.
So with the Catholics specifically, they probably I'm going to guess, they probably weren't happy about you not being of the Catholic faith.
They're not Catholic.
They're not. Oh,
No.
I thought you said they were
No,
Catholic.
that's my nephew's son.
Oh, okay. What religion are they?
They're Christian. They're one of the
Baptist, Episcopalian, one of those.
yes.
Yeah, one of those. So that was strike number one. Okay, so you have these two beautiful children, boy and girl, two boys. What'd you have?
boy and a girl.
Boy and a girl. So you have this beautiful family, and you think, hey, I got this all figured out. I'm going to start my own business. I'm going to be financially secure. I'm going to be able to take care of my family. And you spend your whole life building this rock solid, or what you think is a rock solid structure, and you're all the way at the top, and one day stuff just crumbles. Do you remember the one point where it said, okay, this is over, this is not happening?
I can't pinpoint one thing. There's just lots of things. I mean, I'm just...
But there had to be a day where you filed.
No. What actually happened is she left, she took the kids, and she went back to her mother's house, which was like 35 miles away in Pennsylvania, okay? And I decided, well, I've heard that there are such things as, quote, fathers' rights groups, and I saw something about one of them on TV, and I got to find one of them and get a lawyer referral from them, and let me just immediately go to court and get my kids back here. And I did find a group, and they said, no, we don't recommend lawyers, just as we tell people that right now too. And but I did get involved with them, and I did finally, they did recommend someone. The someone that they recommended was the wife, the new second wife of a guy who had been through a custody battle and who had won custody of his kids. And his new wife went to law school, became a lawyer, and she's now a family lawyer. And so I hired her. I interviewed several lawyers. I said, I'll hire her. And it turns out that was a huge mistake because she didn't know anything.
Oh, she was brand new.
Brand new.
Brand
yes.
new, yeah. Okay.
She wasn't a kid. She was 30-something years old, but she went to law school, after she was already in life for a while. And there's some things that happened in those early times, and I just decided she doesn't understand what she's doing. I got to get rid of her. We got to get somebody else. Give you an example of something that happened with her. One day, there was a day when, for whatever reason, we had to calculate 2/3 of $96. And she takes out her calculator, click, 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 click. Okay, that's $64.32. I said, how did you calculate that? She says, oh, well, 0.33 is a third. So I'm going to do 0.33 times 96, and I'm going to subtract that from 96, and it comes out to $64.32. I said,
That'd work if it was $100.
well, if you carried it out enough decimal places, it would work. Okay, but she just did 0.33. Okay, so I explained that to her. You didn't carry it enough decimal places, and besides which, 2/3 of two numbers that are divisible by 3 is the easiest thing in the world. And I told her, someday there's going to be a time when we're in court and we're talking about financial matters, and on that day there's going to be either another lawyer or an accountant sitting next to you.
Yeah. She takes the kids, goes to her mother's house. Now all of a sudden, and this happens to more men than it happens to women too, but we're specifically talking about men here. It happens all too often because, especially in the state of New Jersey, the laws seem to be a little bit fairer towards females.
I'm gonna dispute that.
Because the only reason I say that is because I've seen it so much, where
Yes.
women will get custody more than men.
It's not the law.
It's not the law. No, it's not the law.
In New Jersey, they had a commission that went through all the laws in New Jersey and removed all gender references. So everything in New Jersey is gender neutral. The problem is the people who administer those laws, they might have their own sets of whatever's going on in their head, how they think things should be.
My buddy, he was fighting with his wife over custody, and I always use him as an example because he got custody of his children. And I remember saying when he finally won custody of his children, I'm like, wow, how screwed up is the mother? Because for a man to get custody, the first shot out of their children, full custody, no visitation on the mother, you have to say to yourself, God, how screwed up is the mother when that comes to it?
Yeah, you see, Dave, the decision makers are the ones that are really getting it wrong.
I have to say that to think that there's something screwed up with a mother is just the go-to stereotype when you have a father get custody in family court. But in reality, it's really, it could be very much a bias of the court system. It could be that, there's nothing really wrong with either parent, but yet somebody has to win and somebody has to lose. And that's the problem with the system that we have today, is that currently there has to be a winner and there has to be a loser. And unfortunately, there are gender switches that people, aren't really comfortable with. They have this perception that ladies, tender years doctrine, moms have to have custody of the children, and anything that goes outside of that stereotypical, bias, I want to call it, is just startling to people. And in reality, most people are normal. Most people don't have issues, but yet the courts are making these decisions that put the kids at a huge disadvantage by having very little contact with one or the other parent.
Because the one thing I've learned about children, I have a 15-year-old and I have a 12-year-old. They need both the mother and they need the father. One parent cannot do it all because there's value to each of them. So that being said, but I know in the way it always used to work in New Jersey, I don't know, with the removal of gender identity inside the law, the way it always used to work is you're fighting. If you're a man fighting for custody of your children, you're fighting an uphill battle.
Wasn't always that way. It depends on how far back you want to go.
I can only remember let me see, when was Star Wars come out? 78, 77? That's about when I can remember.
I was 73 myself.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned something, David, I think it was important, the tender years doctrine. Right. And that tender years doctrine, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's the court and the decision makers kind of being stuck in 1950 when that was, I'm going to say actually, 1950 in general.
That probably started like in the 1910s and went up through probably peaked in 1950s.
What is the underlying premise of that tender years doctrine?
Well, the underlying premise is that mom has the milk and mom can feed the kids. And if you take the kids away from mom, the kids are going to starve.
Yeah, automatically kind of causing a disadvantage to the father.
Because of that relationship that the kids have with the food source, it really becomes, an issue for people to rationalize letting a man take a baby bottle with formula in it and feed their baby. So
times are different now.
The real loser is the child, unfortunately, in this whole situation, because we know what we're getting into. We know we have awareness. Child usually does not have awareness until they reach a certain age. So the children come out to be the losers in all this. So I'm going to ask this question to all three of you. When your children left your domicile, left your family home, it had to crush you. It had to crush you. I can't imagine that. I would imagine that being the worst pain possible. Does that sound fair?
Yeah, that's pretty accurate. Yeah.
Yes. My son was little then. I was very, very close with my daughter. I was working full time, but there were lots of things that I saw, again, because of not living together for a year, lots of things that I saw in my ex-wife where she just wasn't prepared for children. I found out after the fact she had never been a babysitter when she was a teenager. When my daughter was maybe 2 weeks old or so, she told me, I can't do this. It's just too much time devoted to this. I can't. I have to get my sleep too. So I said, tell you what, here's what we'll do. How about when I come home from work, we'll have dinner, and then let's say starting from 8 p.m., I'm responsible for the child. So I'll give her a 10 o'clock bottle. I'll wake up and I'll give her a 2 o'clock bottle. By 6 o'clock, then, I've got to start getting ready for work again, so you can take over then. Okay, fine. So after about, maybe a week and a half, there was a night when my daughter didn't wake up for a 2 o'clock bottle. And all of a sudden I feel someone shaking me. Get up, get up. What's the matter? And I thought maybe the house is on fire. she didn't get up for her 2 o'clock bottle. You got to wake her up and give her 2 o'clock bottle. Like, what? You don't wake up
You
a
don't
baby?
wake up a baby.
That's what you wanted. You wanted to sleep through the night. That's the whole purpose of what you're doing here. So she was insistent, and so she said, well, if you're not going to do it, I'm going to do it. And so she gets up, wakes the baby up, gives her a 2 o'clock bottle. It's like, okay. Oh, and then she said, well, if you're not going to do this, then I'm going to have my mother come over, and she can take care of the baby at night because you're not doing what you're supposed to do. Okay, so now I've got my mother-in-law sleeping on the sofa in my house. So when the baby was a month old, we bring the baby back to the pediatrician for her, 1 month checkup. And, the nurses are looking at doing everything, and the nurses ask, do you have any questions? And my wife says, no. I said, what do you mean, no? I thought you have don't you want to ask them, are you supposed to wake the baby up for the 2 o'clock feeding? She says, oh, yeah. Are you supposed to wake the baby up for the 2 o'clock feeding? And the nurses look at each other and laugh, okay? So she didn't like that I'm the one who knows that you don't wake the baby up for a 2 o'clock feeding, and she didn't. But, I mean, I was involved with a lot of children throughout my life, and she never was.
Is it possible that your wife became a little bit resentful?
Could be.
Of you, because she was... Women have it very difficult when there's a newborn because they're tethered to that, especially if they're breastfeeding. They are tethered to that baby. Yes, they can pump and everything, but they basically become like a feeding tube for the baby.
Yeah. Neither of my children were breastfed. Yeah. They were bottle fed from birth.
Yeah, it's free food, and it's free food. But the women have a difficult job when it comes to that, especially ones that are breastfeeding. They can't really go anywhere. It's a hard life, and I get that. So, a good father will say, hey, how can I relieve this? Obviously I can't feed the baby if they're being breastfed. So tell me what I can do. And I know some women will get very resentful of their husbands because they have that freedom that they lost, but they don't realize that they only lost that freedom temporarily. That it's a now is not forever type of thing. So you think that might have happened with your wife?
The Suffering Podcast welcomes our newest sponsor, Keto Revive. Ketamine infusions that are personalized, accessible, and holistic. Proven treatments for post-traumatic stress, depression, anxiety, chronic pain, neuropathic pain, and so much more. Keto Revive is physician-operated with customized treatments tailored to you and an outstanding support system. Keto Revive offers first responder special discounts. So try something new. Proven treatments. Located in Wyckoff, New Jersey. To find out more, visit Keto Revive at ketorevive.com. Let's start healing today.
I'm not sure. Just let me give you another little piece of background information, okay? When people ask me how many children do you have, I already told you I had two biological children with my ex-wife, but I usually answer that to say I have, depending on how you count them, I have either 2 or 5 or 7, and what that is I have a cousin who was born when I was 10 years old, and he was born with a health issue, and he wasn't supposed to live more than 48 hours, and they operated on him when he was a day old, and he's still around. He's over 60 years old now. And so he was the first child I got involved with. I used to, he's like a miracle baby. I would get on my bike, ride over to my aunt's house. She would have him outside taking a nap in his carriage. I'd wake him up, and we were very close. And then there was another boy was born in that family, and I became close with him too. That's the first 2 children. Then in my sister's family, she had 3 children, and her husband was disabled. He was on Social Security disability. He had a psychological issue, and he couldn't function as a father. So I became, as much as I could, like a surrogate father to them also. So that's 2 nieces and a nephew, okay? And then my 2 children are the last 2. So I had a lot more experience with children than my ex did. And when my daughter was, I guess by about 6 months old or so, she was talking, okay? When she was a year old, she could talk in sentences. She started walking when she was about 7 months old. She could read and write before she started kindergarten, because I'm the parent who's doing things with her.
So how hard was the fight to get the kids back?
I didn't get the kids back.
You never got the kids back.
They are now adult parental alienation syndrome children.
And what are their ages?
43 and 36.
They've never come back and reached out?
Nope. And people tell you, well, don't worry, when they're 18 they'll come back. There's no guarantees on that.
No, there is not.
Yeah.
And your children, you're back with your children, with your child?
Yeah, we have divorced in 2011, and we had 50-50. We agreed on it by consent after 22 months of litigating. But we have a 50-50 arrangement now. And, I just want to circle back to the initial separation. And it's like, when you first go through that, your whole life, you've had contact with your kids every day. Every day of the week, you come home from work, you see your children, your family in the house, and then all of a sudden there's a separation at some point. And this is speaking generally too. Everybody's going through this. And the first thing that goes through your mind is this panic, like, what is going on in that other house with my children?
Yeah.
You have no idea. It's just like, what is happening here? You get worried, you get anxious, you say, it's awful quiet in here. I'm by myself in this house. My ex has the kids this week, or this weekend or whatever. And it's the first time that happens. It's really just, it blows your mind. You just like very unsettling. And the kids, as you're saying, it's worse for the kids than it is for the parents. And we as parents, we experience those emotions when that stuff happens. But at the time that the kids are realizing that mommy and daddy don't live together anymore, there's something wrong here, I don't know what this is, and you realize, as these kids are getting older, they have to adjust to it, they have to adapt, and some kids don't do that very well, and the kids, suffer, and it's really, not a good thing for children, divorce in general. And there's a lot of, if we circle this to parental alienation, there's somebody complicit in that kind of mental abuse of children. But if there's not, the children are still suffering because the world that they've known up to that point where the parents decided to separate is just no longer there. It's just like completely rips the rug out from under their whole worldview. They're insecure. They have a lot of issues where they need therapy to get through these things, and it's a really lifelong adjustment. It's not something that go to a few sessions of therapy and it's all going to be magic and
Slices your heart in two.
Yeah, it does. It's
it would. I always said that. I've told my wife this. I said if we were ever to separate, the hardest thing for me was not being able to put my kids in bed every night.
Yeah.
Or say goodnight to them, or say, hey, buddy, what's going on? But unfortunately, with what you're doing now with FACE, it's kind of like your education in order to get involved with this has come from some real suffering. And that it's a shame that you had to get that job by going through all that suffering, but at least you're doing something with that suffering. So I want to hear a lot about FACE. Like, how did that start? How did you get involved with it? I really want to get into that.
At the very beginning, I wanted to find a father's rights group, and I did find a group that doesn't exist anymore in New Jersey, and that was the first one I went to. Then I also found out there was another group called FACE, Fathers and Children's Equality, in Pennsylvania. And I went to them, attended some of their meetings, and they were great guys. They're nearby. I mean, it's only 10 miles to get to their meeting. But unfortunately, they know zero about procedures in family court in New Jersey, so they can't help me that way. And what I tried to do at one point was to get both of these groups to get together and if not merge, then at least honor each other's memberships. And I was turned down by the group in New Jersey. That group, by the way, doesn't exist anymore, and we do. One day I got a call from someone, and he said, FACE wants to start a New Jersey chapter, and are you interested? And come down to this organizational meeting. So I went. There was 12 people there, and we decided we're gonna start our own organization in New Jersey. We're going to have our own officers. We're going to have our own treasury, but we're going to be a chapter of FACE is one of the oldest groups like this in the country. It was established in 1978 in Pennsylvania, and so we're going to be their New Jersey chapter. And as it turns out, as time went on, in organizations like this, every once in a while there's a civil war in the organization, which there was in Pennsylvania, and we decided, well, why don't we take this opportunity to incorporate as our own organization here in New Jersey, which is what we did, and that's how we got started.
And what year was that?
We had a dispute about that before. What was it, 1991?
Yeah.
93?
91, I'm gonna say.
91, okay.
Yeah.
So you get all these guys in, you get some real horror stories in there, and it's got to pull it. First of all, it's got to drudge up some really bad memories for both of you, for all of you. How are you able to navigate that without putting your own personal experiences into it, giving them the best advice you can?
Okay. I had an issue in family court. I had a case that did not work out well. The people who are coming to FACE are the same age, at that time, the same age as my nieces and nephews, okay? And I have a great relationship with them. I'm going to help these other people. They're going to be my honorary children, and I'm going to help them not make the mistakes that I made, not let the things happen to them and their kids that happened to me and my kids, and that's going to be my life. And that's how I got to right here where I'm sitting across from you and talking about this now.
Because there's if nothing else, let's take the legal advice or take the pro se advice that you give these people. At least they know they're not alone in this fight. So that's the major thing in all of that stuff.
That is huge, yes.
It's group therapy on top of all the information.
I can't count the number of people who come to their first FACE meeting and they come in saying, I have the worst family court case you ever heard about. My case is so bad, 60 Minutes should do a story about this case. Let me tell you how bad it is. And they'll start telling their story and I'll say, oh, okay. But let me ask them, how many days have you spent in jail? Well, I haven't been in jail, and they'll go, okay. And do you have a domestic violence restraint? No, there's no domestic violence restraint, and go on. And I said, well, this guy over here, here's what his story is. And this guy has something else. And that brings people down to earth and makes them think, hey, it's not just me, it's the whole system is screwed up.
We tend to, people who have gone through some type of similar suffering tend to fight for trauma trophies. My stuff is the best, or my stuff is the worst. And it's not true, because while everybody's experience in here is different, at the time when you're going through it, it is the biggest thing, the worst thing that you're going through.
It's the lowest of lows in your life. You can't get much lower than that, other than the death of a family member. The divorce is right up there as one of those really traumatic experiences in life. And FACE is about, when we have the meetings, we're telling our stories. We're telling stories about what happened in this case, what happened in that case, what happened in our case, what happened in your case. We're basically sharing that story back and forth amongst all the folks so they learn. And it's really a teaching exercise. It's really...
You're a legal consortium is what you are. You all have bits and pieces of this giant puzzle that you're able to add to try to make this big picture. You have a different experience. You have a different experience. You have a different experience. But your lawyer might have done something. Your lawyer and your lawyer, they all did something different. And if you put them together, okay, well, here's something, let's try this. Maybe this is the key. Maybe this is something that can help.
When someone is telling their story and I see, oh, he's going down the same path as John Smith did. So let me tell you about John Smith's story and what happened there, because I want him to have that information so he'll know what not to do in his own case.
Absolutely. Because otherwise it's a wasted experience if you go through this for no purpose and you don't learn from it. So how many people show up to a FACE meeting on average?
Last night's meeting was, 20 people?
Yeah, about 20, 25 people every meeting.
And you're constantly seeing new faces coming in, and
there's some regulars and there's some new faces. And usually when people are in the middle of their stuff and their litigation, they're attending, all the time. And then, if things they get divorced or they resolve their issues, then they'll disappear for a month or two. And, if we see somebody else walk in with a similar circumstance, or maybe they had the same judge or had the same lawyer as that person, we'll say, hey, we know somebody that had this judge or this lawyer. Why don't you call this person? We can hook you up with this person, and we'll exchange the emails of the people and let them talk to each other and help each other. So it's really a collaborative kind of effort to basically educate people on what's going on, so that people can sort of steer their boat in the right direction and not run it aground. It's really.
Well, you had said something earlier where you don't recommend. You don't. I think it was you, Jeff, who don't recommend lawyers. You actually teach people how to do it on their own if that's the way they want to go.
Ideally, we would like to show you how to represent yourself in court effectively. Not everybody can do that. Not everybody wants to do that. Not everybody's capable of doing that. So some people need lawyers. And if you need a lawyer, that's fine. But I still want you to know enough about the system and how the system works so that you can direct your lawyer employee rather than allow some lawyer to make decisions for you that are going to affect you and your children for the rest of your lives.
Because your children are the one thing in the world where you'll fight to the death. And if you can't run, you'll walk. If you can't walk, you'll crawl. You always find a way. And unfortunately, lawyers are very expensive, and that can drain a bank account overnight.
Right, yeah. There's a whole community, a whole cohort of people that are just underserved in this, and that's the people that don't have a lot of means and resources to litigate and spend hundreds of thousands of dollars. And that's more the typical case, and the lawyers don't want to touch these people because they're not going to make any money off of them.
Tell them about the ghetto divorce.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Okay. Well, there's a lot of people who get divorced. Some people are, normal middle class people who, they have some assets and things. And so if the courts want them to, they can both have lawyers. And if the court wants them to, they can both pay some psychologists to do a custody evaluation for who should have custody of the kids and pay $20,000 or so for that. And there's other people who are also getting divorced who have nothing. And yet still they get divorced. So how are they able to get divorced for no money? And the middle class people, it's going to cost them like everything that they ever accumulated. And I don't know what the reason is. What other than
I do
money.
Well, maybe it's the judges who are themselves former lawyers want to take care of their brother lawyers. Okay, but the bottom line is, if it's possible to get a ghetto divorce and it's going to cost nothing, I want the ghetto divorce.
So I have a theory. I have a little bit of inside knowledge on this one. What'll happen is one party will go to a lawyer. The lawyer will say, "You deserve that word deserve. You deserve this, and this." No, you don't deserve anything. You tried to. The marriage didn't work. The children are there. You must figure out what to do with these children because you are responsible for raising these human beings. And once those lawyers get involved, and please, I have a lot of friends who are lawyers, but they might agree with me on this. Once they get involved, because the lawyer is the only one that's going to get paid. The lawyer is the only one that's going to get paid.
Win, lose, or draw, no matter what happens in the case, the lawyers get paid.
Correct. So my theory is that's why that stuff happens. Because I know divorces. One of my friends right now is going through it, and they were amicable. They were talking, splitting of the assets, the dual assets and stuff. Now all of a sudden things have changed.
Somebody hired a lawyer. Usually that's the story. Somebody hired a lawyer and the whole thing just goes to hell. And essentially it's now open warfare and everybody's fighting over, the pots and pans and nobody can agree on anything. And the lawyer's saying, "Hey, stick with me, baby. I'll get you everything. I'll even get him to pay the legal fees.
Yeah.
You won't have to do anything."
Yeah.
And somebody's going to sign the retainer agreement and hand over the check, slide it across the table, and that's it. And there it is.
And I think Kevin hit it on the head before about the only losers, really, the true losers are the children. Right. When there's children involved. I mean, the trauma that he spoke of like what it felt like being separated. You hit on it, Dave, as well. For me, I remember characterizing it. 5 years now being alienated from my 3 daughters. I grieve for children that are still alive. And that's what it feels like.
Well, think about this through a child's eyes for a moment. They know mommy and daddy aren't living together. Mommy and daddy don't like each other. One parent may even be bad-mouthing the other parent, which is the worst form of parenting, in my opinion. And this child who just wants to live their life like a normal child has to deal with this manufactured anxiety.
Yeah.
For two grown adults who should not be acting like this around children. It's an unfortunate set of circumstances.
You know, Kevin, here's the bottom line on it. The way the courts are looking at it is we have to decide which parent these kids should live with. Why isn't the court instead saying, hey, we have to figure out a way where these kids can still have two equal parents?
Yeah.
Correct.
That's not part of the equation.
It's crazy.
Or I have another case that I worked with where there were two kids and we decided, okay, we're going to make dad be the primary parent for one kid and mom is the primary parent for the other kid. But they're still going to see each other. They're going to have parenting time with each other. The kids are going to see each other. But that way, neither parent is considered the custodial parent and the other one is the non-custodial parent. They both can claim kids on their taxes. They both can file taxes as head of household because they both have a child.
Instead of the court saying, how do we make this as easy as possible for the children? They're saying, how do we make it, essentially saying, how do we make this as difficult as possible? Forget about the children. They're assets. All right? That's what a child becomes in the court's eyes. Child becomes assets. So how does one become involved in FACE or go to a FACE meeting should they need to? Where would they be able to reach out?
Easiest ways are, one, you can go to our website, which is www.facenj.org.
And what about people in other states? Is there FACE organizations in other states?
There are some similar organizations in other states, but we have people from other states who are coming to our organization because either there's nothing in their area or they have a case that's somehow connected to New Jersey, or I mean, we have people who have, there's no New Jersey connection, just they like what they're hearing from us.
Okay. So, gentlemen, we're coming to the end of this thing here, and being separated from children is probably one of the hardest things that any parent has to deal with. But it's had to teach you something, because like I said before, if you don't learn from your bad beats, then they're really wasted opportunities. So we'll start with you, Jeff. What has your suffering of parent alienation taught you?
Everything that I do in my life, I try to make it as positive an experience as I possibly can. If I'm going to be, if they're going to throw me in jail for something, which they did, I'm going to make that as positive an experience as I can. I'm going to, my first time in a county jail in New Jersey, I decided, well, I'm going to make friends with everybody. I'm going to teach illiterate prisoners to read and write. I'm going to show people how to write their own papers pro se to get themselves out of jail until all the other judges go to my judge and say, hey, get that guy out of there because we don't want him doing that anymore. Well, I didn't quite do that, but I did write an article that made me immune from jail after that. And
it's a nice guerrilla tactic.
Yeah.
and because the jail was, I mean, it was a waste. They're just warehousing people, most of whom shouldn't be. Some people should be there. Most of it is just a waste of time and energy and taking away productivity from all of us. But what I did, I just decided, hey, I'm going to change the system. Okay. That other organization in New Jersey that I told you about, when they decided that they don't want to partner with us, I said, well, you can do whatever you want, but they told me, well, you know, your case is going to turn around and either everything is going to get good and you're going to drop out, or everything will get bad and you're going to drop out anyway. And I thought, you don't know me. I don't give up. Okay. I'm in this until I change the system. So I'm still in it 30 something years. They no longer exist as an organization.
But FACE seems like it's going to be around for a while.
I hope so.
Dave, what has your suffering taught you?
Basically, the things I've learned through my affiliation with FACE is really just, you know, my dedication to helping other people. I think there's a lot of satisfaction that I get knowing that I've helped to turn somebody's case around and made some impact. And it's really, you know, something that I enjoy doing. It's something that I will probably be doing for 30 more years easily if I can. And I expect to be, you know, helping people that are going through this family court nightmare that we currently have. And like Jeff is saying, we really need to change the system, and that's really the other focal point of what we do is really get involved with our political action committee to help propose legislation that changes the landscape of family court for the better, and turn the system that we have into something that we should have, that everybody deserves here, rather than what we are all suffering through at this point. So.
And there's a bill out there, isn't there, about shared parenting and
Yes.
50-50?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's in the New Jersey legislature right now. It's S-163, and the assembly version is I can't remember what it is.
2521.
I think that's it. And what it would do, the law regarding custody is 9:2-4. And this would make 3 very small tweaks to that law to make a presumption of joint physical custody be the first thing that a judge has to consider before considering anything else.
So FACE is making a real impact, not just words, with actual legislation, and that's a wonderful thing. But so I said it on the Instagram Live I did tonight. The biggest commodity in the meaning of life is the impact that you have on others. That is the complete meaning of life. It's not for selfish gain. It's for taking what you've learned and impacting somebody's life, and that's how your name, your organization will go on and eventually live forever. And I applaud you too for doing that. I really do. Thank you so much for coming in tonight. Really appreciate it, because I think you're gonna get some calls on this one, because I'm sure there's a lot of people going through what you're going through.
Let me give our phone number too.
Sure.
888-763-2239.
All right, nobody write that on the bathroom wall. Thank you both for coming in. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
And that's going to do it for this episode of the Suffering Podcast, the suffering of parental alienation. And let's think about all the stuff that we learned. The cracks always show their face. It just takes time. There's always hard stops in every relationship. Kids don't ask to be born. Separation can weigh on your mind, but most importantly, in parental alienation, there are no winners, but the children lose the most. And that's going to do it for this episode. Don't forget to go to popple.com, put in the code TSP20 for a 20% discount on your digital business card. Follow us on all social media. That's Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Clapper, OnlyFans. Follow me at Real Kevin Donaldson. Follow Tom at The Tom Flynn. And, of course, follow the Suffering Podcast. We'll see you on the next episode.